there we go. Let me get the psukim up. And I need this. Okay. You'll see in the Hebrew and in the English, the pasuk we're going to continue with from last time. Spend some time talking about Kiner Mitzvah Torah or last time. And right now, I want to take a look at the second half of the pasuk because it doesn't sound good. It doesn't to our ears in 2026, Tafshin Pei Vav, it doesn't sound good. It says like this: Kiner Mitzvah Torah or, which we saw last week, that for command is lamp, the teaching is light. And what I don't think I clarified, I thought about it afterwards, was that we said, like, why is it in that order? Ner mitzvah and Torah or. Say mitzvah is ner and Torah is or say ner mitzvah or Torah. So the bottom line was that the ner, the candle, is something local. It's short. It's for that moment. You do a mitzvah, then it's over. But light, the Torah itself, is everlasting and keeps going. So ner, the candle that was created with the mitzvah, so to speak, the lamp of the mitzvah, is short-lived. It's not short-lived, by the way, it's short-lived. And the Torah is, oh, it's this light that continues for always. So that was the kind of the last couple sentences I left off last week. The way of life is the rebuke that disciplines. That doesn't sound very nice. Like it sounds like you just need to be constantly told, don't do this, don't do this. You did this, you're a no good Nick. I mean, there's the idea of musar, which can be the idea of an ethical type of way to live. And then you have the negative, not negative, it's not the right way to say it, but the ones like you learn things like Misiyat Yesharim, Achot Tzadikim, Sharei Tshuva, all these things that tell you how to live and how to improve. It's also called Musar. I'm sure many of you know that the so-called Musar movement began with Rabbi Yisrael Salanter and just grew from there. It's 150 years old. That's about it, maybe a little bit more. So what does this pasuk mean when it says "V'derech chayim tochachot musa"? What does it really mean? So it's telling us one of the ways to look at it is that a person who is immersed in Torah, not that it's a tangential part of their life, but truly it's a part of their life, then what they do is they develop a sort of a wisdom for which they're able to navigate through situations where there's no explicit direction. We all face certain circumstances, sometimes every day, sometimes once in a while, that they're black and white things. For example, for a guy, you wake up, like you go to shul or you daven at home, you put on tefillin. It's a mitzvah, you put on tefillin. There's no, do I have to put on tefillin? Do I not? But what happens when a person's sick and they have a stomach problem? They can't stop running to the bathroom. You actually are patur from putting on tefillin if you can't put them on long enough just to put them on without having to run to the bathroom. Again, black and white. You have halacha. What happens though in other areas where it's not black and white? We have to kind of start to think for ourselves, and you don't have someone you can ask, or maybe you don't want to ask somebody. So when you're immersed in the Torah and it becomes part of your life, you start to build tools that enable you to make these decisions on what you're supposed to do. So this pasuk explains, or rather, this explains why this pasuk ends with the words "V'derech chayim tochachot musar." Rebuke is not punishment; it's direction. It's the willingness to accept correction and keep you on the derech hachayim. Some people look at the idea of musar or musar as a dirty word. I'll figure out what to do. You don't have to tell me. I know I'm doing right. I know what I'm doing wrong. No one else has to tell me that. By the way, that's true for most people. Most people know it's the same thing as it says in the beginning of Misiyat Yesharim. He's not there to teach you anything new. You already know what you're supposed to do. You know what you're not supposed to do. In general terms, I mean, maybe not necessarily into the minutia, but we all know what we do right. We know what we do wrong, and where there's improvement that's needed. But so in this pasuk, he's really saying is that through the mitzvot and through the Torah itself, we are able to train ourselves for a life we're of discipline, of being able to say, I know what's the right thing, I know what the wrong thing is, and even though it's not a black and white situation, and even more importantly, is the idea that when something is questionable, we're not sure about it, we have to ask. It could be a rabbi, it could be a friend, it could be a spouse, a child, anybody who you think may be able to give you a perspective that is going to help you navigate the situation you're in. Only after describing the greatness of Torah, then Shlomo reveals its, so to speak, its practical purpose. The next pasuk, take a look. Lishmocha me'eshet ra. It will keep you from an evil woman. Mechelkat lashon nochriya, from the smooth tongue of a forbidden woman. I know I've said this at least 7,000 times, and that's not an exaggeration. But as Shlomo uses the terminology of man-woman relationships, it is not exclusive to that. It's an example of one of the more um, uh, compelling things that happen in life or desires that happen in life, but it's not unique to that. But he uses that as as the story, the mashal. He says, what does he do? Shlomo doesn't start with temptation. Doesn't talk about that. He begins it with protection. What's the word? Sorry. Lishmorcha me'eshet ra. It will keep you, will protect you from this evil woman, again, or evil of anything. So he doesn't start after telling you about the grandiosity and importance of Torah and how Torah protects all this. Now, what is it going to do for you? It's going to protect you. It doesn't start talking about the temptation, but it begins with protection. And that's really consistent with what we saw a while back in Parak Dalet, chapter 4. Mishle is not really primarily interested in resisting temptation once it arrives. Its concern, Mishle, i.e. Shlomo HaMelech, is more concerned with shaping the kind of person whom temptation has almost lost much of its power. Meaning, when we're kids, when we're little, or whenever a person became religious, we learn thou shalt not. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. You should do this, you should do that. Not much of the time, especially for little kids, is there a lot of because involved. We do it because Hashem wants us to do it. Hashem said to do this and that, but not really with any kind of logic necessarily, the reasons behind it in many cases. It's just that's the way it is. Over time, though, we start to think a little deeper. The way you understand a mitzvah or a pasuk in Tanakh today should hopefully not be the same way you understood it when you first started to learn halacha or you first started to learn the Tanakh. It shouldn't, because otherwise you're still stuck where you started, and you need to grow more. We all do. So what Shlomo is trying to give us here is a recognition that he wants to help shape the kind of person we are that will obviate the temptation itself. He's not saying, oh, be afraid. And he has mentioned it different times, but mostly throughout Sefer Mishle, Shlomo is about the idea of shaping and molding who we are. So turn my hair on a second. The description, again, though, focuses on speech. We talked about this before many times, that speech comes up over and over. It's a lishmocha me'eshet ra, mechelkat lashon nochriya, from the smooth, what does it say, smooth tongue of a forbidden woman. Anything that is forbidden to us, for whatever reason, whether it's a married woman, whether it's something not kosher, whether it's doing something on Shabbat we're not supposed to do, when the speech gets involved, when there is the smooth talker, it becomes dangerous. That David says that smooth speech is very dangerous because it disguises the danger beneath the pleasantness. Come on, you'll like it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. No one's going to know. And on and on and on. This is true in people who I've spoken to recovering with any kind of like alcoholic or drug users, any people I've spoken to over time. It was very often, it was a friend. It wasn't just that they came to it on their own. Look, it's not going to hurt you. Try it one time. Big deal. What's going to happen? Unfortunately, for some people, it's a lot's going to happen. But words become this tool for seduction long before the action starts. Again, going back to let's say a guy's attracted to a woman he's not allowed to be with. Okay. He's married, so that's it. He has his wife, that's it. So he gets chummy with his coworker. And look, they say, so we're going to go out, we'll go together. We're away on a conference, so we'll sit together and watch the thing, and then we're going to get to go have a drink. Oh, yeah, big deal. That's way, way, way before anything starts to kick in. The smooth talk, and also the smooth talk of the guy to the woman. It's not the woman just to the guy. It goes both ways. So Shlomo warns us, as it says next, Al tachmod yofya ilvavecha. Do not lust for her beauty in your heart. Val tikachacha be'afapeha. Nor let her captivate you with her eyes. So he starts with the idea of speech, that the woman may say something, but again, the woman can be any temptation, but the speech moves into the visual, and then the even greater, even deeper, the eyes, the window to the soul, as they say. There is, I'm trying to remember where it is. Yeah, let me see real quickly. I should have thought about this before. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna take it off screen share so I can share what I find. Hold on. Yeah, let me go to Breshit. I just thought of this now. It just popped in my head. So if you bear with me for just a second. Tanakh, Breshit, uh, Bet. See if I can find it real fast. If I don't, I'll find it later. Okay, here. Okay, let me share this screen with you. Because this is, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about these psukim, about this pasuk specifically in Breshit. Let me bring that up on the screen now. So in Parak Gimel, in the third chapter in Breshit, is the whole story of the Nachash, the wise snake that tempts Chava, who then tempts Adam, and they both go tumbling down. By the way, parenthetically, do not ever say that they ate the apple. That's a Christian insertion. It is nowhere, shape, or form anywhere. There's an apple. There's a few ideas in the Gemara. One say it may have been netrog. One says it may have been grapes. One said it may have been wheat, but it wasn't an apple. That's for sure. In any case, so now it says here, Vayomer Nachash, let's read these three psukim. Vayomer Nachash el ha'isha. And then Nachash, the snake, said to the woman, Lo motimutun. You know, God told you you're gonna die if you can see. Give me a break. You're not gonna die. Why? Because God knows. The day you eat from the tree, your eyes will open, and you'll be godlike. That's why he doesn't want you to eat from the tree. So what happens? Now, this is the pasuk I want you to see. But the woman saw that the food on the tree looked good to tasty. And it was very desirous for the eyes. So she took the fruit, she ate it, and she also gave to her husband. By the way, I've said this before. Le'isha. You'll notice there's a dot in the hay. It means her ish shelah. The dot refers to the word shelah, meaning her. So le'isha, which you pronounce like an aspirated H at the end, means to her husband. Anyways, you'll see the shlavim, the stages here. She sees something, she feels something, and gets the chemda, like the pull for this idea. So it's the same idea we talked back over here in this particular. Put it back on the screen. And he tells us, he starts off with lashon, the speech. Then he goes into tachmod yofia. Then they don't be like seduced by the beauty, and then and don't allow her eyes to captivate you. So it's again stages. It doesn't just happen all of a sudden. Yes, sometimes things do happen suddenly. A guy wakes up who's having a lousy life. A lady wakes up one day having a lousy life. She says, "You know what? That's it. I got to go find myself something to. I'm going to take some drugs, whatever it might be, or I'm going to just go out and have an affair, whatever it might be." Sometimes it does happen like that, but there's still going to be, in most cases, what I would assume, is it's a process. And that's what he's trying to tell us about here, that the battle begins long before the external behavior starts to happen. So before that guy and woman sleep together when they shouldn't have, which is the battle itself, is that it is started way before that. The external temptation gains power after the heart already wants something. So the struggle therefore begins within. Let's take a look at the next couple of psukim, next slide. I'm going to put this on mute for 1 second. I have a toy here, the house, that my granddaughter plays with. and it just decided to come to life. I'm going to go put it on mute. Okay, there we go. I'm on video there. Very professional, isn't it? Okay, so let's take a look at that. The next um, pasuk, a couple of psukim. Now we get there's a whole section here. I'm going to read just a couple of psukim, and we'll talk about them. Ki v'ad isha zona ad kikar lachem ve'eshet ish nefesh yikarat tatzut. The last loaf of bread will go for a prostitute. Hey, how do we get to a prostitute all of a sudden? A married woman will snare a person of honor. Can anyone rake? We didn't get to this yet. Hayachate ish esh. Can anyone rake embers into their bosom? V'cheko uvgadad lo tisarafna, and their clothes won't be burned. Im yahalech ish al hagechalim v'raglav lo tichavena. Will a person be able to walk on coals without scorching their feet? Okay, there's a lot of imagery here. We got the word zona, which normally means prostitute. By the way, not always. We see that in Sefer Yehoshua. Does not mean prostitute. And we also see Eshet Ish. And Eshet Ish is a married woman, the wife of a man. So we say in English, a married woman. So what's going on in these psukim here? The Torah, Shlomo has already established that the Torah is the guardian for us. Now he explains why that protection is so necessary. The imagery, though, has just changed radically. A couple of psukim ago, we just quoted, Kiner mitzvah v'torah or. Torah was compared to light. Many, many places throughout Tanakh. And now what happened? It's changed. The imagery now, all of a sudden we have is fire. What does fire represent in this type of case? Uncontrolled desire. Uncontrolled desire is compared to fire. What's the difference between fire and light? They both illuminate, right? If I put on a flashlight, I light a match, they both illuminate. Latin lumen, L-U-M-E-N, meaning light. But only one consumes. Fire can, I could put my flashlight and point it at a pile of paper from now until doomsday, as they say. It's not going to burn it. I'm not even talking about using magnifying glass. Not going to burn it. It illuminates. Fire destroys. It consumes. We even say a person has a burning desire for something. So the opening pasuk in this section having to do with burning desires and all, I'm going to see what this means about walking on coals and all in a minute. The pasuk is a little bit difficult to understand, and there are many different ideas that the commentators, the Mefarshim, give us about this idea that the last loaf of bread will go for a prostitute. A married woman will snare a person of honor. What is that really? What's going on here? So Radak tells us that the involvement with a prostitute ultimately reduces a person to poverty. What does that mean? Ad kikar lechem, to the last loaf of bread. Guy's going to spend his money on prostitution. He's going to spend more money. It could be prostitution. It could be gambling. It could be drugs. It could be alcohol, which is also a drug. All these possibilities could lead a person to ad kikar lechem, to the last loaf of bread. They're going to lose and put themselves into poverty. While an adulterous relationship, a relationship with an eshet ish, with the wife of another man, destroys something much more far-reaching, and that's the person's very life. What does that mean? Let's use the Malbim to help us understand that. He said that we're comparing two different types of forms of collapse, of moral collapse. One may cost a person's possessions, prostitution, drugs, whatever else the drug of choice, so to speak, and fill in the blank there, could potentially lead to a person losing their possessions. I'm sure we all know somebody who lost their money on gambling or any other thing that may have been that they've been attracted to, and that's terrible. Okay. But the other, i.e., adultery, threatens his honor, his family, his life. What began as pleasure ends in loss in both situations, whether it's the prostitute slash drug slash whatever, or it's the idea of adultery. They both end in loss. One is far greater. One could be one's possessions, one's home, and one can be they lose their family, they lose their life. I will not go. Obviously, did not happen here, but there's one person specifically that sticks in my head from many years ago. His wife found out he was cheating on his true story. If I was cheating on him, threw him out of the house. He became persona. She made it very public that this was going on. Became persona non grata. No one would help him. And he called me one time that he was sleeping in someone's garage with the permission of as a single guy. I was sleeping in his garage. I'm to the person who owned the garage, single. And he says, I need help. I'm not going to go into what I discussed with him or didn't discuss with him. It turns out also he turned out to be a pedophile, all kinds of wonderful things. So he threw away his whole life. His entire life got thrown away over that. Now, let's assume for a moment, instead of that situation, there's a guy or a lady who they get hooked on gambling, hooked on drugs, or whatever it might be. And they start using, and they lose money. And then they don't have enough money to pay their mortgage. It's a terrible situation. In that situation, also, it's possible to lose the family. But it's very different than the adulterous route. And then Shlomo adds a little layer to this and tells us that he asks two rhetorical questions. Can a person, put hot coals on himself and his clothes won't be burned? Can a person walk on coals and his feet won't get burned? These are rhetorical questions. But why is he saying this? The power of the question is that they're obvious answers. I can say, well, if a person walked too far one day, could it really hurt him? Okay, or her? Maybe not. I mean, it's a subjective objective. Who knows? Maybe. No one can argue with the laws of fire the way Hashem created them. If I take a match and I put it to my finger, it's gonna burn me. Nikuda. End of story. Fire burns because that's its nature. So what it's telling us is that sins operate according to the similar principle. The consequences are not arbitrary. If I were to light, I'll say for myself, a person were to take a match and light their finger, God forbid, right? Put a match over the finger. What would happen? All of a sudden, a little branch of a tree would grow out of the finger. That's a ridiculous consequence. If they did that, all of a sudden, the lights in their house would go. That's not normal. What is normal, the way Hashem created the world, first of all, thank God he gave us pain receptors, and they're different in different parts of your body. If you don't know that there's a consequence that you cannot argue with. You can't say, well, you can put your hand on the boiling hot stove. Don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt you. The consequences are not arbitrary, and they're imposed to the outside, so to speak, and they're built into the fabric of creation. The Maharal tells us that doing averot, doing sin, is self-destructive because it goes against the order Hashem embedded within creation. Hashem created the world, among other reasons, that we should do and keep his Torah mitzvot. So Shlomo is telling us much more than morality. He's teaching us reality. It's a very big difference between morality and reality. Yes, one has to be moral. One has to follow the rules, and one has to, you don't commit adultery, you don't get hooked on gambling, you don't get hooked on drugs, you don't any of these things, and you should live a good and moral life as best and upstanding as possible. But there's also reality involved. But you don't, and you mess up, there are consequences. Sometimes they're mitigated, sometimes they're not. What's the difference, though, between theft and adultery? Now he's going to add another layer. Take a look. Okay, let me just read a little bit more here because it's not going to really spend time on every single pasuk. So too, a person who sleeps with his fellow's wife, no one who touches her will go unpunished. Okay, that's the continuation of that. There's always consequences, whether you realize it or not. I don't know you, a person realizes it or not. There are always consequences to that. Now he moves into another layer, and we're going to see how they connect. Lo yavuzu, we're right here. Lo yavuzu leganav ki yignov lemalei nafsho ki yirav. For stealing, a thief is not held in contempt for stealing to appease his hunger. But v'nitza, if he's caught over here, Yishalem shivatayim. He will pay sevenfold. At kol hon beito yitain. He may have to give up everything he owns. So wait a second. It sounds like over here when he's talking about adultery or talking about the prostitute, he loses big time. And now he says, look, you can understand sometimes why people might steal, but there's still consequences for that. What's he saying here? What's he trying to tell us? Why introduce theft altogether? So David explains that the thief may have acted, as we see in the pasuk, out of hunger, desperation. The act is still wrong because theft is still theft, but people can understand the motivation. If there were a guy who walked into the makolet, the local makolet, and took a bag and stole some bread and some juice and some milk and whatever it might be and walked out and is caught, but it turns out he doesn't have 2 shekels to rub together because he just fell in hard times. It's not good that he stole. Probably should have just gone to Mickey and said, could you help me out? And he would have, but he stole. But we can understand it because logically we can put ourselves maybe in that position. God forbid I'm in that position. I would have nothing to do. I'm going to go dumpster diving. I'm going to go begging on the streets. And I might have to end up stealing. We understand that. But if he's caught, there are consequences. He repays sevenfold. I'm not going to get into why that specific number because you don't pay 7 times. You either pay, we don't do this today, but the time was a Sanhedrin and others. But when someone stole and they were caught, they paid double. Say you stole 1,000 shekel, you pay, and you're caught, you pay 2,000. Why? Because you should feel the pain, but someone felt the loss of the 1,000 shekel. And the Torah talks about if you steal different types of animals, or you pay 4 times the amount, 5 times the amount. If you slaughtered it and sold it, doesn't make a difference right now. But while the damage is significant, you stole, it's something that can be repaired. You can pay back. You can make the store owner whole again. You can make your neighbor whole again if you stole from them. Adultery is fundamentally different. Because what does it say here? No'ef isha chasar lev, mashchit nafsho hu ya'asena. Or he who commits adultery is devoid of sense. Only one who would destroy himself does such a thing. What does that mean in normal English? Oops, 1 second. What does that mean in normal English? The adulterer exhibits a profound absence of judgment. He is willingly destroying the very institutions that make civilized life possible. He's destroying the institution of marriage, trust, family, and human dignity. Unlike stolen money, it cannot be simply repaid. Now, I will tell you that it can be sometimes fixed. Can be. But generally, it's not fixable. Usually, it's extremely destructive. And it is nothing like, you can't say, like, guys, oh, he's so hungry, so we understand why he stole. Okay? Or a guy ends up, committing adultery. Oh, I can understand. What do you mean you can understand why? It's horrible. It's a horrible thing. So it can't be just simply repaid. The last part here explains why restitution, not prostitution, restitution, repayment is impossible. Key, why? It says key, I lost the place here. Ki kin'a chamat gaver lo yachmo biyom nakam. The fury of the husband will be passionate. No. Let me just see where I'm here. Yeah, the fury of the husband will be passionate. He will show no pity on the day of his vengeance. Lo yachmo biyom nakam. What does that mean? What's he talking about here? The Radak tells us that jealousy is unlike ordinary financial loss. Money can be restored, honor cannot. Broken trust simply cannot be purchased back. So therefore, lo yisaf v'nechol kol kofer. No payment will ease the wound. I mean, yes, you go to if there's a desire on both parties to try to stay married together. Yes, you got to go to therapy, and you spend the rest of your life apologizing and doing the right thing, and everything that goes with that. It's more problematic when it's a Kohen involved, but that's a different story. But that crime has entered the deepest levels of human relationship. And the chapter ends where it has to, and that is that some actions damage not just possessions, like we saw a few psukim ago with the prostitution, for example, or with theft, but the moral fabric upon which society itself depends. Now, the difference between the prostitution situation and the Eshet Ish, or the married woman, is the guy's single and it's a prostitute versus a married man and a married woman, or okay, or a man who's not married with a married woman. I'm not advocating for either, obviously, just trying to tell you the difference between the two situations. So these two last sections we just now did kind of bring together the message of Perek Vav, or chapter 6. First, Shlomo teaches us that Torah is a companion that guides us through our lives, protects us, it enlightens us, and he explains that both with examples and with metaphors and similes throughout this chapter. And it's supposed to be part of our conversation. It's one of the things we talked about last week, the sicha. He to sichecha. It is. Torah is your conversation. You talk about Torah. You find Torah in everything. I'm sure I've mentioned this in other classes, not this one, that I used to play a game. I haven't done it for a long time with some of my students over the years, especially the younger ones, like 10, 11 years old. Name anything, and I'll somehow connect it to Torah. And I was able to do it because everything connects somehow back to Torah. They randomly pick a baseball bat, whatever it was. And I was able to, first, I still remember the first kid said to me, a bench. I said, simple, it's a Mishle. Two people are sitting at a bench, the third person sits down, and the bench collapses. Who's responsible? The last guy or all three? So there's all kinds of things you can do with this. But it's part of our daily conversation. It's what guides us through our day. And only then does Shlomo give us what the consequences are of ignoring that guidance. Again, the guidance is there as a protective measure, not no, but as a protective measure. The order is very important here. Mishle does not begin with fear, it begins with wisdom. Remember, you cannot forget this. Shlomo HaMelech was known as the Chacham Mikol Adam, the wisest of all men. So, of course, he's inserting wisdom at every level that he can. Shlomo doesn't ask first, how can I avoid punishment? He asks, what kind of person must I become so I naturally walk in that light? So I'm going to give you an example, which I've said a few times over the years. So if you've heard this, you can go to sleep for a bit. And it's very much timed since we just finished Tisha B'Av. Sefer Zechariah, which we are seeing come to life right now in front of our very eyes. The Sefer Zechariah, let me take this off the screen share for a bit. People are going back. If you know a little bit about Sefer Zechariah, you know a little bit about Ezra and Nehemiah. It's the time period. It's called Shivat Zion. People returning to Israel from the Galut and the exile into Bavel, and they're going back to Israel, and they're going to rebuild Beit HaMikdash. And they come with a very legitimate question to Zechariah. They say, hey, got a question for you. They have a mishlachat, a group of people comes to Zechariah and asks them this question. We've been fasting for 70 years because the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. We're building it again. Do we have to fast anymore on Tisha B'Av? You and I would think, great question. You know what? Next Tisha B'Av, are we going to fast even if we have a Beit HaMikdash? Do we still have to fast? Perfectly legitimate question. No. And sensible question too. So Zechariah does not give them an answer yes or no. He says something completely different. He said, you're asking the wrong question. That's not the question you should be asking. We have been without a Beit HaMikdash for 70 years. And even though 70 years is going to be longer until they physically finish building it, we've been without a Beit HaMikdash for 70 years. You should ask a better question. What can we do? How can we change so that we don't go through this again after the second Beit HaMikdash is built and lose that as well? Forget the fasting. That's so secondary. You think that's the important thing of Tisha B'Av. It's the message of Tisha B'Av, which in the first Beit HaMikdash was Gilui Arayot, Shvichut Damim, and I'm just running blank, and murder, Shvichut and Avodah Zarah, rather. Worshipping idols. That's what caused the first Beit HaMikdash to be destroyed. And eventually they learned the lesson, by the way, because the Sinat Chinam that caused the second Beit HaMikdash to be destroyed, things were actually going swimmingly well in those other areas. But Zechariah was telling us, and again, Shlomo is giving us a similar message here, that don't talk about the punishment and the bad. Talk about how you can mold your character to be a good enough person that you don't even get drawn into that section of temptation whatsoever because it's not worth it. Okay, so now let me open up here. One moment, please. Okay, do a screen share. What I want to do, and we're going to probably take us the rest of the class now. For those of you who learned Navi with me many years ago, Sefer Shmuel, Sefer Melachim, you know that the way I used to do that was to read an entire perek and then go and ask questions, then go back and start to go through it again. And I don't do that with Mishle for various reasons. But tonight I'm going to do that. I'm not going to necessarily present questions, but I want to read the chapter because it's broken down into specific sections. I want to take a look at that for a little bit. So let's look at this Mishle slide. I even made a nice little slide. You can bask in the glory of the beauty of the slide. Okay. Okay. And I put it on the top what each of these sections represent. The first 5 psukim is talking like an introduction to the rest of the chapter. Torah is the only protection. You'll see some words or expressions that have appeared in plenty other places already that we've done. B'ni shmor amarai, my son, listen to my words, keep my words. Was here, heed my words. Umitzvotai titzponitach, and store my commandments with you. That's not a good example of the translation. Matzpun, a person's conscience, internalize these mitzvot, these commandments with you. Shmor mitzvotai v'chyei, keep my commandments and live. V'torati ki ishon einecha, speaking in the name of Hashem, and my teaching is the apple of your eye. Ishon is not an apple, but that's okay. Koshrei al etzbeotecha, bind them on your fingers. Kotvei maluach libecha, and engrave them, write them rather on the tablet of your heart. Here it says mind. If you are somewhat knowledgeable regarding some other areas that Shlomo has written, remember he wrote Shia Shivim, he wrote Mishle and Kohelet. The wording here, we'll go back to it when we get to it, of Kotvei Maluach Libecha is actually something, a similar idea you're going to see in Shir HaShirim. And I'm going to actually digress for 1 second. There's a pasuk in Shir HaShirim that says, Simeni kachotam aluach libecha, set me as a seal upon your heart. Sometimes you're going to see, actually that was our invitation to our wedding 45 plus years ago, Baruch Hashem. That was the pasuk that was on our invitation. And most people are unaware of an interesting little factoid. When I meet with the Chatan and Kala, I try to tell them this. I do tell them this. I heard this many, many years ago, and I don't remember who told it to me. When a Chatan puts the ring on the Kala, she extends her right index finger. He says the pasuk, the words, and after that puts the ring on. Why there? Why not on the ring finger? Why not on the ring finger? That's a weird finger. And then she takes it off and moves it to the ring finger. So there's the belief in ancient times that there was a specific vein that ran from the index finger directly to the heart. It was like the shortest route to the heart. So what? So it's based on the pasuk, Simeni kachotam aluach libecha, set me as a seal upon your heart. So when the person, the chatan, is putting the ring on the kala's finger, on the index finger, in a sense, he's living the pasuk, set me as a seal upon your heart, because he was putting it straight onto the heart. So it's a really nice idea. I don't know if it works as far as the actual way the human body works. I don't know, but I think it's a beautiful thought. And he uses similar imagery here, kotvei maluach libecha, to write these things on your heart. And more lechochma achoti at. Say to wisdom, you are my sister. Now, if that's not a strange statement, I don't know what is. There's a very cool explanation for what it means. We'll see, Bezrat Hashem. Umoda lebeina tikra, and call understanding a kinswoman. Lishmocha meisha zara, she, the Torah, will guard you from a forbidden woman, similar to what we just saw in the last parak. Minochya mareh hechelika, from an alien woman whose talk is smooth. Similar imagery. Next section. Vav through Tet. Okay, there's only a few psukim. Ki bachalon beiti be'ad eshnabi nishkafti. From the window of my house, through my lattice, I looked out. I haven't looked at it yet, but I'm trying to figure if there's a connection between this And if you know the story about Sisra and Barak, and Sisra's mother's looking out, and a couple of those words, I'm going to see if there's got to be a connection there. Va'ere bapitaim avina babanim na'ar chasar lev. I looked out and I saw among the simple, noticed among the youths, a young man devoid of sense. Over bashuk etzel pina. He was crossing the street near the corner. V'derech beita yitzad, walking toward her house. A young man devoid of sense. He was crossing the street near her corner. It's not really a street; it's the shuk, it's the market near her corner. Ben neshef be'erev yom, walking toward her house in the dusk of evening. Be'ishon laila v'afela, in the dark hours of night. You see the ishon here. You saw the word ishon before, so there's got to be some connection. We'll see. V'nei isha likrato, and a woman came towards him. Shit zona Nsuret lev. She was dressed like a streetwalker, like a prostitute with a set purpose. Omiyahis v'soreret. She is bustling and restive. Veveita lo yishkenu ragleha. She is never at home. Pam bachutz, pam barchavot. Now in the street, now in the square. Ve'etzel kol pinat te'erov. And she lurks at every corner. Again, this imagery is not just talking about a prostitute. This is the idea that danger could lurk around any corner. She lays hold of him and kisses him. She brazenly says to him, I had to make a sacrifice of well-being. Today I fulfill my vows. What in the world is she talking about? Therefore I came out to greet you, seeking you and have found you. Marvadim ravadti arsi chatuvot atun mitzrayim. I have decked my couch with covers of dyed Egyptian linen. Nafti mishkavi mor aholim v'kinamon. I have sprinkled my bed with myrrh, aloe, and cinnamon. It gets stranger and stranger and stranger. Nafti mishkavi mora olim v'kinamon. It said, "Lechav nirved dodim ad haboker nit'alsa be'ehavim." Let us drink our fill of love till morning. Let us delight in amorous embrace. Ki ein ha'ish beveito halach b'derech me'ar chok. For the man of the house, her husband is away. He is off on a distant journey. Wait, didn't you just say she's a prostitute? Tzaro ha'kesef lakach bi'ado leyom ha'keseh yavo veito. For he took his bag of money with him, and he will return only at mid-month. Hitatu berov likcha. She sways him with her eloquence. She turns him aside with her smooth talk. Again, this idea of speech, of seductive talk. And he thoughtlessly follows her like an ox going to the slaughter. We are familiar with the term like a lamb to slaughter. Like a fool to the stocks for punishment. The stocks where you put your hands and headed. Like a fool to the stocks for punishment, until the arrow pierces his liver. He is like a bird rushing into a trap, not knowing that his life is at stake. Conclusion, the father's conclusion. Now, sons, listen to me. After all this imagery, which we have to look at, it's going to take us a while to go through it, I'm sure. He says, pay attention. Don't let your mind wander down her ways. Don't stray down her paths. For many are those who she struck dead. And numerous are her victims. Her house is the highway leading to Sheol. Sheol is the Tanakh way of saying Gehenna or hell. Yordot el chadrei mavet. She's leading down to death's inner chamber. Now, it sounds like a very, very dark chapter. It's a very heavy chapter when it comes to both metaphors and similes, and it starts and ends with, you better pay attention because listen to myself. Well, didn't he just kind of do this already? So it leads us to lots of questions on this particular chapter, which we'll see Bezrat Hashem next week. Let me just double check, but I'm pretty sure. Baruch Hashem, I have 3 or 4 weddings coming up, a lot of stuff going on. I just want to make sure that we're okay for next week. Next week is already August. Oh my Lord. Okay, for Sunday the 2nd. No, we don't have class next Sunday night. I actually have a wedding, Bezrat Hashem, so we'll figure something out, maybe a different night. Okay. In the meantime, Shavua Tov to everybody, and let's have some Besorot Tovot, and catch you later. Thanks a lot.